Hello, this is Sebastian Lehrich from the CloudScale project. In this video I'm going to show you how to generate load with Apache's JMeter. We generate load in order to measure appropriate demands and service effect specifications. And as we remember correctly here, we want to measure these demands here where I entered the first value I just made up. We want to measure that now, and in order to measure, we actually have to generate load on the system in operation, so we can get measurement values based on this load, for instance for measuring response times. Therefore, we continue preparing the measurement for this TPC-W system from the last Screencast episodes. So far, we instrumented our code, so we have the probes that measure response times. We also send the system into operation, so it is running somewhere on our servers. What we have to prepare now is the load generation. I'm using Apache's JMeter for that. So if I install JMeter and open it, I'm getting basically this window here where I have to set up my test plan. Okay, in order to do so, I right click on the test plan, choose Add, go to Threads Users and add a thread group to my test plan. So I left click here, and now now I can configure this thread group here. Well, the load generation basically corresponds to my usage scenario of the model. So basically, I can name this thread group here as home interaction. Let's say usage scenario. And the number of users is basically specified over the number of threads, also written down here in brackets. And if you remember our usage scenario, we modeled on the model level, we had one user in a closed workload. So this one here is already correct. We did not specify any ramp up period time, so we can just set that to 0 here. And let's say how often do we want to simulate these users? In our usage model we did not specify any limit, so let's just say this is forever until we basically press the stop button later here in our load generation tool. Okay, so we can now already save here if you want to, and then continue with setting up the next items here. So the next thing we want to add is actually a configuration element. So we right click on our home interaction usage scenario, choose add, and now choose config elements. And as we want to put load on a web application, which is accessible by HTTP requests, we first set up HTTP request defaults for the context of our web application. So we choose HTTP request defaults here, left click, and get a HTTP request defaults properties sheet here. And here we just enter basically the IP address of our application. In my case, that's the TPC-W application that is operating on this IP address here. And as I'm using an Apache Tomcat with default configuration, I can use the default port of Apache Tomcat, which is 8080 here. The project name or the path of the project on the server is, for my case, this path. So basically that is the URL I have to access, or I can access also via a normal web browser, and I just configure that here. In case we want not only to measure the loading of HTML code, so XML code, but also measure the time it takes to load images, which are basically referenced in the static HTML code and afterwards resolved by a browser, for instance. So if you also want to measure the time it takes to load these images that are later resolved in the second phase, basically, we also have to check the retrieve all embedded resources from HTML files, and can also set up a pool size for the concurrent loading of these files. For instance, I could use the number 6 here for 6 parallel threads that in parallel load images from the server, which is also a typical behavior of normal web browsers. Okay, so that would be my default configuration. Again, I could save here. Well, this is basically just a configuration of, or the default configuration of my load generation. I can now also add the concrete HTTP request I want to submit to the system. For that, I go again to Add by right-clicking on my usage scenario, choose now Sampler, and select HTTP request as an item here. And well, this HTTP request now basically follows my default configuration as shown here. But in contrast to my default configuration, I can make adaptations here to to refine my default configuration. So what I don't have to do anymore is to check this retrieve all embedded resources from HTML files, because that's a part of the default. So I don't have to override that. However, I could, for instance, say here I do want to call a specific page called TPC-W under home under interaction. That would be the location of the home page of my TPC-W application on the web server. And basically that's already it. I configured the complete test plan. What I could do, if I'm interested in that, is to add, for instance, more items here, for instance, listeners, for instance, for response times. So this response time graph would show me the response times from the viewpoint of the load generation here. That may help in benchmarking the application. Also other values may help here. My suggestion is just to have a look at the documentation of Apache JMeter. It is really good, and you find advanced properties here. The basic setup I already have shown to you. So this load generation configuration here now models what I've specified already in the model. All I have to do basically is now to push the play button and the load generation will be started. Afterwards I can press the stop button to stop load generation again. And that's it for generating load. In the next screencast we will see how to actually start the measurement. So we will now put all the pieces together. So we send the system into operation, start the load generation, monitor the whole system during its whole operation time, have a look at live measuring data based on the message queue we use. And we will basically execute the whole measurement. Thanks for watching.